Yes. Last call in the house. And you know what today is? Well, it's no necessarily special day, but it's about 2 days away from Halloween, man. Welcome to the Last Call channel, specifically Last Call Reacts. Just to let you know a couple things about what I do over here, or what we do over here for the most part. Once a week, I drop a little video on some news events or, just little messages or something thematic, what's going on, maybe about 10, 15 minutes. So we got to start this one off. And I drop that once a week. Other than that, on Friday, I have a live at 9 p.m. This week it's at 10 p.m. because we're doing a little something different. Myself and my co-host, Josephine, the Chatavist. And we go through a whole bunch of stuff, man. We hang out sometimes. We get deep on conversations, whatnot. But this Friday, because it's Halloween and Friday is Halloween, we are doing a watch party. And the movie is Night of the Living Dead. So come check us out while we do our thing. And, you could watch an old school movie with some friends. But I wanted to get into a little something on this one. If you noticed on my last few videos that I've done whatever it is, horrors. So I did stand-up horrors last time. And basically, this concept about blood or things that might be intertwined with evil. And I thought that it might be a good time to talk about this guy. Do you know who this is? I'll give you a second. All right, second up. This is Robert Johnson, not B.E.T. Robert Johnson. This is a different Robert Johnson that you should know, man. I remember when I was doing, some of you guys know that I did a little bit of music stuff back in the days, and I did some DJing and all that. I'm not in any facet of entertainment now or anything as an older dude. I shouldn't say it like that. I'm not an old dude like that. I just, I can't do the party life like I used to, man. And I do other things in an office, that kind of stuff. But, even on my own time for leisure, I used to do a little DJ and stuff. And, of course, I used to experiment with some other music. Now, when I say experiment, I'm not like some other people that just might listen to some stuff and be like, I got it. I deep dive. I want to know what the studio sessions were like. I want to know what the air was like back in the day. If Motown is recording, what recording in that Motown house Hitsville was like on the dirt floor covered with plywood while they, kick up dust and play the tunes back in the day. By the way, Motown has some good stories. We got to get into that. Maybe a little, a few episodes in and whatnot. And I don't want to waste your time with this. It's just my excitement with music and this particular story. So here we go with this and why it's thematic. And we're going to tie it in a little bit. It's a nice little Halloween story of Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson was said to have been born in 1911, August 16th. May 8th. I'm looking at the wrong thing over here. Now, obviously, he was known as a blues musician, and we all know these names, right? But we don't know the significance of who played what. We can't even really get stuff of who played certain roles like 20 years ago. All right? We're talking about goddamn a century ago almost, right? So his singing, guitar playing, and songwriting has been landmarked from 1936 and 1937. He's had recordings that influenced later generations of musicians. Although his recording career only spanned, they say, like 7 months, which kind of isn't true. His popularity at the time was roughly about 7-8 months or so. But he's been playing since he was a little dude, Today, he's recognized as the master of the blues, particularly the Delta blues style. Now, when you say the Delta blues, there's so much to go into with blues. I wish that you would take the time, carve some time out to learn a little bit about it. I believe out of all people, Martin Scorsese does a thorough deep dive into a blues catalog and stuff. You guys should check it out. If I find it on here, I'll try to drop a link for you guys if you want to do some more blues stuff. But the reason why I was really digging into blues was while I was making mixes and I had some, back in the day CDs out, which were doing some streaming things, like a little before that, getting into that, I started to develop my blues catalog in order to put something out there. And I did back in the day too, so I don't know, it could be floating out there somewhere. So the Delta blues is kind of exactly like you would imagine, the stereotypical on a porch with a guitar and maybe a harmonica and stuff like that. That sort of deal, playing, and of course in the juke joints as well. So it's very distinct. A lot of locations had their distinct style of blues. And don't get it twisted, man. Blues is credited for rock and roll as you know it today, or as you knew it in the 80s. I remember way back, what's his name? I see his name with his face with the dreads and all that. Lenny Kravitz. I remember way back when he was a big deal and he was on Arsenio Hall specifically. And one of the things that he brought up was, a lot of brothers, a lot of black people give him kind of a tough time for doing this rock thing. And his response to that was, this rock thing is our thing. It's been taken. All these rock groups take it, as I'm going to touch on in just a little bit, did what they did. But the roots is that rock, country, blues, of course, R&B. This is black music. Now, as a traveling performer who's played mostly on street corners and juke joints and at Saturday night dances, Johnson had little commercial success or public recognition in his lifetime. He had 2 recording sessions, both produced by Don Law in San Antonio in 1936 and one in Dallas in 1937. And it produced about 29 distinct songs and about 13 alternative takes. So get your hands on that if you like the blues. This is the guy to go to. These songs recorded solo in improvised studios like hotel rooms or, little places where they could set up the equipment to do this stuff. Most were released that they made between the 1937 and 1938 sessions, and some were released after his death. And some real neat things here. I can't go into this whole thing. This is just for discussion. Discuss on the show, discuss it on your own, and perhaps like we do a little digging in the crates, you could do a little bit of digging in your crates on your own, and while you could sit back, and you can't you could enjoy it, but you won't necessarily enjoy it to its potential unless you know the background, the atmosphere, the texture of the music that you're listening to versus just flip it on because it's something to flip on and music was built from it. Much of Robert's story has been reconstructed by researchers and music lovers. Johnson's poorly documented life and death gave rise to the legend, which is him. So there's a lot of mystery in everything involved in this guy in his short time, not only on this earth, but in the so-called music industry and in the South as well. This is a fascinating story, and there's been a couple little movies and some references and stuff, but nobody's really been able to crystallize Robert Johnson's life or just the time in the music business, right? So the whole lore with this and how this ties into Halloween is that he is the blues player who supposedly walked miles, went to the so-called crossroads there in Mississippi, where they have a marker there for him today, and they say he sold his soul to the devil. It's actually an amazing story because before he went to go do that, I guess you could say his mentor with Son House at the time. You should know Son House and his influence in the blues game. Blues is fascinating. Blues is fascinating because it came up in the 20s, 30s, almost into the 40s. Didn't get as much play, but because it's discovery and because of records being pressed, got a resurgence around the 50s and 60s. So we're here thinking like some things started in the 50s. All right, but nah, man. Before World War II, a lot of there was already a scene. Now, here's an interesting thing. His music had a small but influential following in his lifetime. In the decades after his death, he died in 1938, by the way. A person by the name of John Hammond sought him out for a concert at Carnegie Hall. So he was so big back in the days in 1938, and part of me didn't know that even Carnegie Hall went back like that for performances. But it was the start of a series called Spirituals to Swing. They got a hold of Robert Johnson's music and wanted him. Now, that's how you know you made it back in the day, when you perform at Carnegie Hall, right? So finally, by the time this guy, John Hammond, heard of Robert Johnson, his sound, all that kind of stuff, he went to go send for him, only to discover that Robert Johnson had passed away. Now, Hammond was a producer at Columbia Records, and he bought all of Johnson's or most of Johnson's original recordings, which wouldn't be too hard to scoop up because it was comprised in those two those two recording sessions. All right. A musicologist by the name of Alan Lomax went to Mississippi in 1941. Remember, it was said that he died in 1938. That he went to Mississippi in 1941 to record more of Robert Johnson. But he also didn't know that he passed away damn near 3 years prior. In 1961, Columbia released an album of Johnson's recordings called King of the Delta Blues Singers, produced by legendary producer and music historian Frank Driggs. It is credited for finally bringing out Johnson's work to a wider audience and starting to get the recognition that he should have had, right? Now, that album would become particularly influential with the British scene. And we're talking about Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, Rob Plant, the Led Zeppelin dudes, Bob Dylan, anybody that was a name back in the day that people went crazy. Not only the so-called British invasion, but over here in America as well, of course. But America back then, artists, and you weren't Little Richie or moving the lines like that. Delta Blues had a little bit more to prove because a certain class came with this. Robert Johnson spent most of his time as a youth, even from 1911 on, working as his family worked on plantations. So don't think after the Civil War they got rid of plantations. No. All right, that's another thing with the sharecroppers and everything like that. There was nowhere to go. So this is the man's beginnings. I got to move it on a little bit here like that. So all these guys that we love so much, or you go into your local bar where they're playing this kind of music, even the old heads in there, bikers, these dudes that love the rocker so much, guess where it came from? That's right. I'll give you a minute. Now, many of the songs, and even up to Nirvana as well, he did some stuff. He copied Leadbelly, some other people in there too. A lot of things that you think are catchy little songs back in the day. Blues. The blues was the birth of that. So we're gonna move on just a little bit because I want you to know exactly. Now, there's been some documentaries. I might try to. Yeah, you see, the thing is trying to give. There's no real official. There's a couple. John Hammond had a documentary. It's called "The Search of Robert Johnson" by John Hammond. That's supposed to be one of the closest recounting of his life there too, right? Nas used some of his work there. All right. They don't even know for this guy where he's actually buried. There's about 3 plots, 3 tombstones for Robert Johnson because they don't even know. So people go to pay homage. I think a couple rock groups over time, because they didn't have the money to really bury him the way in 1938, the respect that he should have been given in the first place. Now, they credit him for being really one of the first rock stars, because at the end he was kind of elusive. Now, here's a little bit of his story that you don't know. I was talking about Son House earlier. There's a lot to go through, and I only really wanted to make this about 20 minutes or so. But I want you to know a few things. So he was dedicated to playing as a youngster, but he wasn't great. As a matter of fact, Son House, his mentor, said, he didn't have that much talent coming up. People actually wanted to pay him to stop playing. It was said he was ridiculed so much one night. He packed up his guitar and everything, and he damn near disappeared. Now, the timeline varies, whether he was gone for a year or so. Son House, who was probably closer to him at this time, because Robert shadowed him closely to play. So whenever Son House took a break on stage like they needed to sometimes, Robert Johnson would jump up on stage and play a little. And people just weren't digging it. But true to the craft, he practiced. Then one night he got ridiculed so bad, he disappeared. Son House says maybe about 7 or 8 months. Some people say a year or a longer time. It's a little fuzzy in that regard. And the credit this time, he went and played with another person that supposedly he got more chops playing with this other blues legend. But the main thing that happened when he went away was that he sold his soul. He went to the crossroads, and supposedly this is called Faustian theory or logic. When you sell your soul to gain something from the devil. And this is what he did. There's now how the meeting went. There's many variations that he went to the spot. He was approached by a very large individual who offered to, quote unquote, tune his guitar. He gave it to him. This figure tuned it, gave it back. And Robert Johnson came back to town with all sorts of confidence and playing capabilities. Now, even Son House now had to watch with amazement, because he was doing things that have never been done with the guitar. One of the things he was credited with was his sounded like 2 people were playing instead of 1. That he sounded that good, and people were now in amazement. Now, I do have to admit, no, I didn't see Sinners yet. Maybe I will before the weekend is through. But apparently there's a character by the name of Sammy in the likeness of Robert Johnson in there, for those of you that have seen that and didn't make that connection as well. Another thing with him, we think that he's older. But no, he actually passed away. He was born in 1911, passed away in 1938, which made him 27 years old when he passed. The significance of 27 is that there's a 27 club of artists that have also passed away at 27. Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, Janis Joplin, and a few others. Jim Morrison, rock and roll people that passed away damn near, as we know it, maybe the height of their career. Very suspicious very exclusive club to be part of. Now, for Robert, they say his mannerisms, he was always polite. He would up a little, but he was well mannered and he let his music talk for him and release all the energy that he had too. Now, during this rise, when he's having all the success, now they want him to play places. They wanted him to play at Carnegie Hall as well, which is amazing. One night, he's offered a drink, and he was warned by one of his homeboys, don't take a drink. Don't take a drink from that bottle, and you don't know it was an open bottle, and the rule is you don't drink from no open bottle when you don't see who opened the bottle, man. But he's on his grown man shit. He drank it and almost instantly became ill. So ill that in the next few days into the morning, and I think into the next day, some of the information's a little bit fuzzy, he would die. And those are the chain of events. Now, there's some discrepancy that Robert Johnson often gets confused with another blues musician by the name of Tommy Johnston, who said Tommy Johnson is actually the guy who, quote unquote, sold his soul to the devil for the success. But I don't know. Obviously, this isn't a one or two artist thing. After this is why they say in rock and roll and Ozzy Osbourne, the devil, this is why it's associated. Now, there's something a little deeper, and this is as far as I'm going to go with this before I close it up. So in the churches and around the community, they had to separate themselves, especially the gospel and the church folk. They couldn't be associated with this music because it was evil. Even the mention of the devil or other beings and spells and powers to be able to do things, they could, but you know what? They couldn't mess with that. But you know what? Also, these musicians now in juke joints are making more money they're making more money on a Saturday night than the pastors on Sunday morning. So, again, not written in stone, but they say the pastors in some of the churches had a little hand in dealing in the discreditation of some of these musicians, and it may have benefited some of them to emphasize the evil misdeeds of Robert Johnson going to the crossroads and making a pact with the devil. Now that scared the shit out of people. And then he passed. So give him a listen to. But isn't that crazy? Blues had a couple revivals back in the days. And if it's really not, you don't have any doorway to blues or anything like that. You just think it's some porch music that people used to listen to back in the day. There was pride in it. These weren't just musicians. This was a lifestyle. They dressed in pinstripe. Look at Robert Johnson in this picture. They dressed to the teeth, to the hill, to go to these sweaty, dusty, juke joints and so on to play this music for the people. It's amazing. And just a little bit of a story for you about the Robert Johnson, and maybe a reminder that blues stuff is out there and it's significant. And if you're looking for something new to, sink your teeth into, why not? Why not discover or rediscover blues? It's yours. It's great music. Do me a favor. If you like the video today, drop me that like, of course. Share it with some friends for me. And most importantly, help me out and subscribe to my little channel. And beyond that, if you like that, come join me to watch Night of the Living Dead Friday night, which is Halloween. We're going to be hanging out. Peace. Thank you for checking out Last Call. Hope you liked the story.